The Cosmic Celebration Commission studies human sports fans because our joy is infectious. Part 1. Senior researcher Aura stared at the readings on her scanner and tapped it 3 times with her secondary manipulator. The device had to be malfunctioning. Nothing in the galaxy produced emotional resonance patterns like this. Harmonic 7, check your instruments, she said to her colleague, a being made of living crystal who shimmered with mathematical precision. I'm detecting celebration levels that exceed the spawning festivals. Harmonic 7 rotated their core structure to examine their own equipment. Their voice came out in perfect musical tones. My readings are identical to yours. The source appears to be a structure humans call a stadium. Approximately 80,000 individuals are gathered inside. Aura's species, had been studying galactic cultures for 12,000 years. She had personally documented 743 different civilizations and their celebration rituals. She knew what massive joy looked like on sensors. This had to be a planetary liberation, or perhaps the end of a devastating war, or the discovery of a cure for some terrible disease. Pull up visual feeds, she ordered. Let's see what historical event we're witnessing. The flickered to life, showing the interior of the stadium. Aura leaned forward, her 4 eyes widening in confusion. Thousands of humans sat in rows, all facing a large rectangle of grass. On the grass, 22 humans in different colored clothing were running back and forth, chasing a small spherical object. What are they doing? Asked Junior Analyst Al, a reptilian being from a warrior culture known for their tactical brilliance. I have no idea, Aura admitted. For the next 2 hours, the research team watched in bewilderment as the humans on the grass kicked the ball between them, occasionally propelling it toward rectangular frames at either end of the field. When the ball went into one of these frames, the crowd erupted. The emotional sensors nearly exploded from the surge of pure joy that radiated from the stadium. Harmonic 7 ran the data through 17 different analytical frameworks. This makes no sense. The individuals in the crowd are not related to the individuals on the grass. They receive no material benefit from the ball entering the frame. The competition appears to have no stakes whatsoever, yet the emotional investment is equivalent to life-or-death scenarios in most species. Play that moment again, Aura said, pointing to the timestamp when the ball had entered the frame. The moment of celebration. The hologram rewound. They watched as a human in red clothing struck the ball with his foot. The ball arced through the air, curved around several defending humans, and entered the frame. The human who had kicked the ball dropped to his knees, arms spread wide. His teammates swarmed him. The crowd became a single organism of joy, jumping, screaming, embracing strangers. Look at the biometric data, said Pollendrift, the team's medical specialist, whose species resembled a floating cloud of glowing particles. Their neurochemical responses are identical to life-affirming events. Dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin all flooding their systems. But why? What purpose does this serve? Aura pulled up the Cosmic Celebration Commission's database and began cross-referencing. The CCC had been monitoring emotional patterns across the galaxy studying how different species expressed collective joy. Every documented case of mass celebration had a clear cause: survival, reproduction, resource acquisition, or significant achievement. This had none of those elements. It was just humans kicking a ball. We need to go down there, Aura decided. We need ground observation. The team took their shuttle down to Earth's surface and activated their perception filters, which would make them appear human to local observers. They purchased something called tickets and entered the stadium just as another match was beginning. The atmosphere hit Aura like a physical force. The air vibrated with anticipation. Humans around them were dressed in the colors of their chosen team, faces painted, voices already hoarse from shouting. An elderly human woman next to Aura smiled and offered her a small flag. "First time here, love?" the woman asked. "Yes," Ara replied, studying the woman's biometrics. Her heart rate was elevated, adrenaline levels high, but she showed no signs of distress. She was excited. You picked a good one, Derby Day. We're playing our oldest rivals. Rivals? Ara asked. The woman laughed. Oh, you really are new. Don't worry, you'll understand soon enough. The match began, and Ara tried to analyze what was happening through a scientific lens. The rules seemed simple enough. Each team tried to get the ball into the opposing team's goal. The team with more goals at the end would win. But the emotional investment from the crowd was anything but simple. Every pass, every tackle, every near miss generated waves of reaction. When the home team moved the ball forward, the crowd roared encouragement. When the opposing team gained possession, a collective groan rippled through the stands. The humans around her were living and dying with every moment of play. Harmonic 7, sitting 3 rows behind Ara, sent her a private communication through their neural links. This is fascinating. The humans have created artificial tribal structures. They identify with these teams as strongly as my species identifies with our mathematical houses, but there's no actual kinship connection. And no violence, Al added, his warrior instincts trying to make sense of what he was seeing. On my world, when tribes compete with this level of passion, it ends in bloodshed. But here, they just shout and wave flags. In the 37th minute of play, the home team scored. Ara had thought she was prepared after watching the recordings. She was wrong. The stadium exploded with sound so intense it triggered her species' defensive reflexes. Every human around her leaped to their feet simultaneously. The elderly woman grabbed Ara in a fierce hug, tears streaming down her face. We did it, we bloody did it, the woman shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. Ara's scientific detachment crumbled. The joy was overwhelming, infectious, impossible to resist. She found herself smiling, her heart's beating faster, caught up in a celebration for something she didn't fully understand. Over the next 3 months, the research team attended hundreds of sporting events. Football, basketball, cricket, baseball, hockey, rugby. Every sport had the same effect. Humans poured themselves into these games with complete abandon. They analyzed statistics, debated strategies, wore team colors like badges of honor. They passed this devotion down through generations. Fathers brought daughters to stadiums. Grandmothers taught grandsons team songs. I think I'm beginning to understand, Pollendrift said during one of their analysis sessions. They're not celebrating the game itself. They're celebrating belonging. Explain, Ara prompted. Watch this recording from last week. Pollendrift pulled up footage from a small local match. See those 3 humans, different ages, different genders, different ethnic backgrounds. By human standards, they would have almost nothing in common, but they're all wearing the same team shirt. They're singing together. They're friends because they chose the same arbitrary team to support. Harmonic 7 chimed in, their crystalline structure pulsing with interest. It's elegant, actually. Humans need community, but they're a fractious species. They divide themselves over everything: resources, beliefs, appearance. But sports fandom gives them a way to choose their tribe. Anyone can join. All you have to do is care. Al pulled up comparative data. I've been studying their history. Humans used to form these tribal bonds through actual warfare. Nations against nations, constant conflict. But as they developed, they needed an outlet for those instincts. Sports became a substitute. They get all the tribal identity, all the passion, all the conflict, but nobody dies. More than that, Ara said slowly, pieces falling into place. They get the joy of victory without needing to crush an enemy. They get to experience defeat and learn resilience. They get a hope for next season, next game, next year. It's renewable, endless, a perpetual source of meaning and emotion. She looked at her team. They had been on Earth for 3 months, and something was changing in all of them. Harmonic 7 had started following Manchester United, checking scores during work hours. Al wore a Yankees cap he'd bought at a gift shop. Pollendrift had opinions about basketball draft picks. And Ara herself had attended 3 more games than her research protocol required, just because she wanted to. "We need to report this to the Commission," she said. "Humans have discovered something unprecedented. They've created joy from nothing. They've weaponized celebration itself." "Do you think other species could be affected?" Pollendrift asked. Ara thought about the elderly woman who had hugged her in the stadium, about the pure, unself-conscious happiness in her tear-filled eyes, about how that moment had made Ara feel connected to a complete stranger across species boundaries. "I think," Ara said carefully, "that we already are." Part 2. Ara drafted her preliminary report to the Cosmic Celebration Commission at 300 hours, unable to sleep. She had been studying human sports culture for 4 months now, and the data was becoming more concerning every day. Not concerning because it showed something dangerous, but because it showed something impossible to resist. She typed carefully, choosing each word with precision. Human sports fandom represents an unprecedented form of emotional contagion. Initial observations suggest that exposure to human celebration behaviors may influence non-human psychology in unexpected ways. Her communicator chimed. It was a message from Harmonic 7. "Are you watching this? Extra time, Chelsea versus Bayern, this is incredible." Ara checked the timestamp. It was the middle of the night. Harmonic 7 was supposed to be in regenerative stasis, the crystal equivalent of sleep. Instead, they were watching football. She deleted her diplomatic phrasing and started over. "We have a problem." The next morning, Ara called a mandatory team meeting. Everyone looked exhausted. Al's scales had dulled slightly from lack of proper rest. Pollendrift's usual bright luminescence was dimmer. Harmonic 7's crystalline structure showed slight fracture patterns from insufficient regeneration time. "We need to discuss what's happening to us," Ara began. "Nothing's happening," Al said defensively. "I'm conducting thorough research into human competitive hierarchies. Baseball provides an excellent case study in statistical analysis and strategic thinking." "You painted your shuttle in Yankees colors," Ara said flatly. "It was a camouflage decision, to blend in better with local." "You argued with a hot dog vendor for 45 minutes about whether it was better than Jackie." Al's tail twitched, a sign of embarrassment in his species. The vendor was wrong. Defensive metrics were clearly. He stopped himself. "You're right. Something is wrong. I don't even know who these humans are, but I care deeply about defending one's legacy against the other." Pollendrift drifted forward, their particles swirling anxiously. "I've been modeling the contagion effect. The joy humans experience during sports appears to create a feedback loop. When they celebrate, they release the emotional energy into their environment. Other humans absorb it, amplify it, and release it again. It becomes a cascading wave of happiness." "But we're not human," Harmonic 7 said. "Our neural structures are completely different. This shouldn't affect us at all." "Yet it does," Ara said. "I watched a cricket match yesterday. For 6 hours, I didn't need to, I didn't mean to. But every time I tried to leave, something happened. A good bowl, a boundary, a wicket. The crowd reacted, and I felt compelled to stay and see what happened next." "Cricket is particularly insidious," Pollendrift agreed. "The extended time frame creates multiple opportunities for emotional investment." Al stood up suddenly, his posture rigid. "I need to confess something. I've been organizing a fantasy football league with the research team from the Commission on 17 different planets." The room went silent. "You did what?" Ara asked. It started innocently. "I was explaining my research to Coordinator Hal, who's stationed near. I mentioned how humans create these imaginary teams using real players, and she seemed interested. Then Research Unit from the Andromeda Outpost wanted to join. Then others. We're up to 43 participants now. We have a draft scheduled for next week." Ara felt something crack inside her careful scientific composure. It was the sound of her species' legendary self-control finally giving way. She started laughing. Once she started, she couldn't stop. The absurdity of it all crashed over her. They were supposed to be studying human behavior, not adopting it. The Cosmic Celebration Commission had sent them to document an anomaly, and instead, they'd become part of it. "We're in trouble," she said when she finally caught her breath. "We need to report this immediately." She composed a message to the Commission's director, a being of pure energy named Luminous Eternal who had existed for 50,000 years and had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. If anyone could provide perspective on this situation, it would be them. The response came back within hours, just 3 words: "Don't tell anyone." Ara stared at the message in confusion. She sent a follow-up: "Director, I don't understand. This is a significant finding that requires immediate attention from the full commission." This time the response took longer. When it came, it included a video attachment. Ara opened it, and her 4 eyes widened in shock. The video showed the Commission's Grand Council chamber, a space designed to inspire awe and dignity. 200 of the galaxy's most distinguished researchers filled the chamber, and every single one of them was watching a football match on the main. Luminous Eternal appeared in the corner of the frame, their energy form pulsing with colors that Ara's translator interpreted as sheepish embarrassment. "Researcher Ara, we need to speak privately. Secure channel only." Ara switched to an encrypted frequency. "Director, what's happening?" "What's happening?" Luminous Eternal said, their ancient voice somehow managing to sound defensive, "is that I may have started casually observing human sports broadcasts approximately 6 weeks ago. For research purposes only, you understand." "Of course," Ara said carefully. "And I may have mentioned these observations to a few other commission members, who then began their own observations, for research purposes. Naturally. And now the entire commission may be completely invested in the outcome of what humans call the Champions League. We've been rescheduling major policy meetings around match times. 3 separate diplomatic incidents have been peacefully resolved because the parties involved didn't want negotiations to interfere with the semifinals." Ara felt dizzy. The Cosmic Celebration Commission was the galaxy's premier authority on cultural emotional studies. They were supposed to be objective, detached, scientific. They had a reputation spanning. "Director, what do we do?" "Do?" Luminous Eternal's energy form brightened with something that looked like excitement. "We study it properly. This is the most significant discovery in celebration research in 10,000 years. Humans have found a way to manufacture joy from nothing. They've created renewable happiness. Do you understand how important that is? But we're supposed to be impartial observers. We're becoming participants." "Perhaps," Luminous Eternal said slowly, "that's the only way to truly understand it. Every other species we've studied celebrates achievements or biological imperatives. Humans celebrate because they choose to. They decide something matters and then it matters. That's not just unusual, that's beautiful." Over the next few weeks, the situation expanded beyond anything Ara could have imagined. The Commission stopped pretending this was contained. They issued a galaxy-wide bulletin about the phenomenon, expecting concern or criticism. Instead, 17 member species immediately requested access to human sports broadcasts. Within days, viewing parties were happening across multiple sectors. A hive mind collective, whose millions of individual units normally thought as one, split into 2 factions over whether Barcelona or Real Madrid played better football. They found the experience of internal disagreement fascinating. A species of void dwellers who normally only communicated once per century started having weekly meetings to discuss the NBA playoffs. They still only spoke to each other once per century, but now they gathered to watch basketball in comfortable silence, which for them was practically chatty. Ara received a message from her counterpart studying the aquatic worlds. You've ruined me. I just spent 3 hours explaining the offsides rule to a species that doesn't even have feet. They still don't understand it. Neither do I, but we're all watching the World Cup qualifiers anyway. The most surprising conversion came from a species known for their absolute emotional control and philosophical detachment from material concerns. Their representative, a monk who had achieved the 7th level of transcendence, contacted Aura with a question that shook her understanding of the universe. Does Liverpool's recent form suggest they've overcome their defensive vulnerabilities, or are they simply benefiting from a weak schedule? Aura realized then that this wasn't contamination. It wasn't infection. It was invitation. Humans had opened a door to a kind of joy that didn't require justification or achievement. You just had to walk through. And the galaxy was walking through in droves. Part 3. 2 years after the Cosmic Celebration Commission first detected the anomaly, Aura stood before the Galactic Council to present her final findings. The council chamber held representatives from 847 species, each one present to hear about the phenomenon that had reshaped galactic culture. She looked out at the assembled delegates and noticed details that would have been unthinkable before humanity's introduction to the broader galaxy. A trade minister wore a small badge showing support for the Australian cricket team. Two species that had been in a minor territorial dispute for decades sat together, both wearing jerseys from the Brazilian national football team. A military commander from a warrior culture famous for their stoicism had painted his ship's insignia in the colors of Manchester City. The chamber fell silent as Aura activated her presentation. She had spent months preparing this report, knowing that what she said here would influence policy for generations to come. "Honored delegates," she began, "I stand before you to present the Commission's findings on what we now call the human joy phenomenon. Our initial concern was that humanity represented a form of cultural contamination, spreading behavioral patterns that could disrupt established civilizations." She paused, letting that sink in. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. This had been the fear, after all, that human enthusiasm was a kind of invasion. "We were wrong," Aura continued. "Humanity hasn't contaminated us. They've healed something we didn't know was broken." She pulled up holographic displays showing data from across the galaxy. Since widespread exposure to human sports culture, we've documented a 34% decrease in armed conflicts. Trade disputes have dropped by 41%. Most significantly, reported levels of individual life satisfaction have increased across 72% of surveyed populations. And delegate from the Crystalline Consortium stood, their voice chiming like bells. "But surely these are temporary effects. Novelty wears off. Entertainment loses its appeal." "That's what we thought," Aura agreed. "But human sports culture has been studied for 2 years now, and engagement is increasing, not decreasing. We've identified why." She changed the display to show footage from various sporting events across Earth. "Humans don't just watch games, they invest in narratives. Every season is a story. Every match is a chapter. Characters develop, heroes rise and fall, underdogs triumph, dynasties crumble. It never becomes stale because humans make sure it never becomes stale. They've engineered perpetual meaning." Al stepped forward to add his analysis. In the 2 years since beginning his research, he had become the galaxy's foremost expert on the strategic elements of human sports. From a tactical perspective, what humans have done is remarkable. They've taken the psychological drivers of warfare, tribalism, competition for resources, and channeled them into completely harmless activities. Their sports give them everything warfare provided: glory, identity, shared purpose, but nobody dies. Nothing is destroyed. When the match ends, both sides go home. A military delegate from a species still engaged in 3 active conflicts leaned forward. "You're saying we should watch football instead of fighting wars?" "I'm saying," Al replied carefully, "that on we've had a ceasefire in place for 18 months. Not because of diplomacy or treaties, but because both sides wanted to watch the World Cup. After the tournament ended, nobody wanted to restart hostilities. We discovered we had more in common than we thought. We both loved the sport. We both hated the referees' decisions. We both believed our favorite teams deserved better. Pollendrift added their medical perspective. The neurochemical benefits are undeniable. Humans have created a delivery system for happiness that requires no drugs, no technology, no genetic modification. Just care. Just choosing to let something matter. Other species are experiencing mental health improvements simply from adopting this practice. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates argued this was dangerous cultural homogenization. Others insisted it was the most significant breakthrough in relations in recorded history. Ara let them argue, understanding that this was part of the process. Every major shift required resistance before acceptance. Finally, the council speaker, an ancient being whose species had founded the Galactic Council itself, called for order. We will hear from the human representative. Sarah Martinez stepped forward. She was an elderly human woman, a retired coach who had spent 50 years teaching children to play soccer. When the Galactic Council had requested a human perspective on sports culture, Earth's government had sent her instead of a diplomat or politician. Ara had recommended her personally, remembering the elderly woman who had hugged her in that first stadium 2 years ago. Sarah looked tiny on the vast council floor, but her voice carried clearly. I've been coaching kids for half a century. You want to know what I've learned? Sports don't matter. Not really. Whether a ball goes in a net, whether someone runs faster than someone else, in the big picture, it's all meaningless. The chamber went dead silent. This was not what anyone expected. Sarah smiled. But here's the thing, we get to choose what matters. Life is hard. The universe is vast and cold and doesn't care about us, so we make our own meaning. We decide that this team, this game, this moment matters. And because we decided it does, that's not weakness, that's power. She gestured around the chamber. You've all been arguing about whether our sports culture is good or bad for the galaxy. You're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what brings you joy? What makes you want to wake up tomorrow? What gives you something to hope for, to celebrate, to share with others? Sarah pulled out a worn baseball cap from her pocket. This was my father's. He wore it to every game I ever played. It's just fabric and thread, but it means everything to me because I chose to let it mean everything. That's what humans do. We take ordinary things and make them extraordinary through the simple act of caring. She looked directly at Ara. Your researcher asked if our joy is infectious. Yes, it is, because joy should be infectious. Happiness should spread. We've spent too much of our history spreading pain and fear and hatred. Isn't it better to spread this instead? The council speaker called for a vote. The question was simple. Should human sports culture be formally recognized as a beneficial practice for galactic civilization? And should resources be allocated to promoting sporting events? The vote was unanimous. In the history of the Galactic Council, only 7 votes had ever achieved unanimity. This was the 8th. 3 months later, Ara attended the inaugural Galactic Bowl, a football tournament featuring teams from 43 different species. The rules had been modified to accommodate different physiologies. 4-armed species could only use 2 arms. Flying species had to stay within a certain altitude. Energy beings had to maintain physical form. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely perfect. Harmonic 7 played midfielder for a team that mixed crystalline beings with gaseous entities and traditional bipeds. Their team name was the Cosmic United. Their jerseys were a garish combination of colors that hurt Ara's eyes, but Harmonic 7 insisted it represented unity in diversity. Ara sat in the stands next to Sarah Martinez, who had been appointed the first commissioner of sport. Around them, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds cheered and chanted. Did you ever imagine it would become this? Ara asked. Sarah laughed. Honey, I spent 40 years coaching 8-year-olds in suburban Pennsylvania. I knew exactly what would happen. Give people something to cheer for, someone to cheer with, and magic happens. On the field, Harmonic 7 received a pass and dribbled forward. Their crystalline structure refracted light in dazzling patterns as they moved. A defender from a species of sentient plants tried to block them, but Harmonic 7 executed a move they called the Manchester Spin and slipped past. They took the shot. The ball sailed toward the goal. The crowd held its collective breath, thousands of beings unified in anticipation. The ball hit the back of the net. The stadium exploded. Aura jumped to her feet, screaming. Sarah hugged her, laughing and crying at the same time. Around them, species who had never met before high-fived, embraced, and celebrated together. Harmonic 7 sprinted toward the stands, their teammates chasing them. They leaped into the air, their crystalline body catching the stadium lights, creating a shower of rainbow colors. Their team piled on top of them in celebration. Aura pulled out her scanner, intending to document the emotional resonance readings for her records. Then she stopped and put it away. Some moments didn't need to be analyzed. Some joy didn't need to be measured. It just needed to be felt. Later that night, she filed her final report to the Cosmic Celebration Commission. It was short, just 3 paragraphs. The last paragraph read, "Humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy is not their technology, their art, or their diplomatic skill. It is their absolute commitment to joy. They have shown us that happiness doesn't require justification. Celebration doesn't need a reason beyond the decision to celebrate. In a universe that often feels dark and empty, humans have taught us how to create our own light. We should be grateful for this lesson. I know I am." She attached one final piece of data. A video of the winning goal, of Harmonic 7's impossible shot, of the crowd's eruption, of species from across the galaxy united in perfect, uncomplicated happiness. Then she closed her terminal and headed out to join her team at a local bar, where they were watching replays of the match and arguing passionately about whether the referee had made the right call on that controversial foul in the second half. As she walked through the streets of Earth City, she passed a small playground where young humans were playing football in the fading light. They weren't very good. They kept kicking the ball out of bounds. Their teams were uneven. Nobody was keeping score properly. They were having the time of their lives. Aura smiled and kept walking, finally understanding what Sarah had meant. It wasn't about the game. It never had been. It was about choosing to care, choosing to hope, choosing to let yourself feel joy over something that didn't matter at all and meant absolutely everything. The galaxy was better for that choice, and so was she.